If you can afford this necklace, I'll quit right now. The manager's voice carried across the showroom. Not loud, not shouting, but loud enough. Loud enough for nearby customers to stop browsing. Loud enough for 3 sales associates to glance up from their counters. Loud enough for everyone to hear the challenge. For a moment, silence settled over the luxury jewelry store. Then came the laughter. A few employees smiled. One customer chuckled. Someone near the watch display whispered, "No way." The manager folded his arms. Confident, comfortable, certain, because standing in front of him was a black woman wearing faded jeans, worn sneakers, and a simple gray cardigan. No designer handbag, no visible jewelry, no entourage, nothing that suggested wealth, nothing that suggested power, nothing that suggested she was about to become the most important person in the building. The necklace rested beneath a glass display case. A one-of-a-kind diamond piece. Handcrafted, rare, expensive enough to make headlines. The price tag alone made people blink twice. The manager tapped the glass lightly. This piece costs $3.8 million. More laughter. A younger employee looked uncomfortable. The woman, however, didn't react. She simply studied the necklace. Calmly, thoughtfully, as if she were evaluating a painting. Or remembering something. Interesting. Very interesting. Because most people reacted when they were embarrassed. Most people defended themselves. Argued. Walked away. She did none of those things. Instead, she looked at the manager. And smiled. Not a sarcastic smile. Not an angry smile. A patient one. Then she asked, "Is that your professional opinion?" The question caught him off guard. "What?" "That I can't afford it." The manager laughed again. This time louder. Several customers joined him. "I've worked here 9 years." He straightened his tie. "I know who buys jewelry like this." The woman nodded slowly. "I see." The manager mistook her calmness for surrender. That would prove to be a mistake. A very expensive mistake. Across the showroom, a young sales associate named Olivia watched quietly. 24 years old. New to the company. Still learning. Still hopeful. Still believing customer service meant serving customers. No matter what they looked like. She stepped forward cautiously. "Ma'am, would you like to see the necklace up close?" The manager shot her a look. Olivia hesitated, then continued anyway. The woman turned toward her. The warmth in her eyes appeared instantly. "Thank you." 2 simple words. Nothing special. Yet somehow they felt genuine. Olivia unlocked the display. Carefully lifted the necklace. The diamonds caught the showroom lights. Tiny sparks dancing across polished marble floors. The woman examined the craftsmanship. The setting. The details. Not the way a dreamer looks at something unattainable. The way an expert evaluates quality. The manager didn't notice. Neither did most of the customers. But Olivia did. Interesting. Very interesting. Because for the first time all afternoon, she began wondering if everyone else had made a wrong assumption. The woman asked several questions. Specific questions. Technical questions. Questions about sourcing. Questions about certification. Questions about the original designer. Questions that surprised even Olivia. The manager's confidence slipped slightly. Only slightly. "Enough. Have you worked in jewelry before?" Olivia asked. The woman smiled. "A little. A little." The answer seemed simple. Yet something about it felt incomplete. The manager checked his watch. Growing impatient. Because he believed he already understood the situation. He believed he knew exactly who she was. And exactly who she wasn't. Outside the showroom, rain clouds gathered above downtown Chicago. Luxury cars rolled past the glass storefront. Pedestrians hurried along the sidewalk. The city moved with its usual rhythm, unaware that inside this showroom, a lesson about judgment was quietly beginning. The woman handed the necklace back. Olivia carefully returned it to the display. For a moment nobody spoke. Then the manager smirked. "You know," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "If you actually buy it, I'll hand in my resignation before closing time." Several people laughed again. The woman looked directly at him. Calm, unshaken, almost amused. Then, she glanced once more at the necklace and said 7 words that would change everything. "That's a very interesting offer, sir." Nobody noticed, but Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. Because suddenly, it sounded like she was considering it. For a few seconds after she spoke, nobody said anything. The manager smiled. Certain he had won. Certain the conversation was over. Certain the woman would eventually thank Olivia for her time and leave. After all, that was usually how these encounters ended. People browsed. People dreamed. People left. The luxury showroom continued its rhythm around them. Soft piano music drifted from hidden speakers. Crystal lights reflected across glass display cases. A couple near the watch section discussed anniversary gifts. An older businessman signed paperwork for a custom order. Everything looked normal, yet something felt different. Olivia sensed it first. The woman wasn't looking at the necklace anymore. She was looking around the showroom, not admiring it, studying it, as if she were evaluating something much larger than diamonds. Interesting. Very interesting. Because customers usually focused on products. This woman seemed interested in people. She watched a sales associate greet a wealthy couple. She noticed a porter helping an elderly customer reach a chair. She observed how employees spoke to one another when managers weren't listening. Small details, tiny moments, the kinds of things most people ignored. Finally, she turned back to Olivia. What do you enjoy most about working here? The question surprised her. Olivia blinked. Excuse me. The woman smiled. Your job. Olivia laughed softly. Nobody had ever asked her that. Not customers. Not managers. Not even during interviews. She thought for a moment, then answered honestly. I like helping people find something meaningful. The woman's smile widened. That's a good answer. The manager rolled his eyes, apparently finding the conversation pointless. Meanwhile, Olivia continued. My grandmother used to say jewelry isn't really about jewelry. The woman seemed genuinely interested. Oh, it's about memories. The showroom noise faded slightly around them. Olivia shrugged. A ring means a proposal. A watch can mean a retirement. A necklace might remind someone of a person they love. The woman nodded slowly. Your grandmother sounds wise. The younger employee smiled. She was. For a brief moment, something changed in the woman's expression. A softness. A memory. Gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Interesting. Very interesting. Because beneath her calm confidence lived something deeper. Something personal. Something nobody in the showroom could see. The manager checked his watch again, growing more impatient. Are we done here? Olivia's smile disappeared. The woman turned toward him. Not offended. Not angry. Simply curious. You seem eager for me to leave. The manager laughed. No. A pause. Then he added, I'm eager to help actual buyers. Several nearby employees looked away. The comment landed exactly as intended. A public insult disguised as professionalism. The woman absorbed it without reacting. Then she asked another unexpected question. How long have you managed this location? 8 years. You must be proud. His chest lifted slightly. I run the highest performing luxury showroom in the region. The answer came quickly, confidently, almost rehearsed. The woman nodded. That's impressive. The compliment seemed to satisfy him, at least for the moment. Across the showroom, 2 young associates quietly discussed the situation. One felt embarrassed. The other found it entertaining. Neither understood they were watching a moment that would be discussed for years afterward. Outside, a black SUV stopped briefly across the street. Then another. Neither vehicle attracted attention. Chicago was full of expensive cars. Nothing unusual there. Inside the showroom, the woman continued walking slowly through the displays. Olivia accompanied her. Not because she expected a sale, because she genuinely enjoyed the conversation. The woman asked thoughtful questions. About gemstones. About craftsmanship. About company history. About employee training. Questions far more sophisticated than most customers asked. Eventually, Olivia became curious. Have you always been interested in jewelry? The woman laughed softly. No. What changed? The answer came after a brief pause. My mother. Olivia smiled. What about her? The woman stopped near a display of vintage pieces. For a moment, she stared at an emerald pendant. Lost somewhere in memory. My mother cleaned hotel rooms. Olivia listened quietly. She worked double shifts most of her life. The showroom seemed quieter now. Even the manager found himself listening. The woman continued. When I was 12, she showed me a necklace through a department store window. A small smile touched her face. Nothing expensive. Nothing rare. Just beautiful. Olivia nodded. The woman looked toward the diamond necklace again. She told me something I'll never forget. What was that? The answer came softly. Never let anyone else decide your value. The words settled into the air. Simple, powerful, real. For some reason, Olivia felt goosebumps. The manager looked away first. Uncomfortable. Not because he understood the meaning, because part of him did. And he didn't like it. The woman checked her watch. The first time she had done so all afternoon. Interesting. Very interesting. Because it seemed she had been waiting for something. Or someone. A few moments later, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. Then smiled. Not the polite smile she had shown customers. A genuine one. The kind people reserve for those they trust. Those they love. She answered immediately. Hello. Olivia turned away politely. But she couldn't help overhearing part of the conversation. Yes. I'm still here. A brief pause. Another smile. No. Everything is going exactly as expected. Olivia frowned slightly. Exactly as expected? What did that mean? The woman listened for several seconds. Then nodded. Perfect. We can proceed. Proceed with what? Before Olivia could wonder further, the woman ended the call and slipped the phone back into her purse. Calm. Relaxed. Certain. The manager noticed something too. For the first time since she entered the showroom, she no longer seemed like someone browsing. She seemed like someone who had reached a decision. And somehow, that made him uneasy. Very uneasy. The woman turned toward the diamond necklace one final time, then looked directly at Olivia. I think I'm ready. Olivia smiled politely. Ready for what? The woman glanced toward the manager, then toward the display case, and answered with complete confidence. I'd like to purchase the necklace. The showroom went silent. Completely silent. And suddenly the manager's joke about quitting didn't sound quite so funny anymore. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody laughed. The silence that followed felt strangely heavy. The manager stared at her, then at the necklace, then back at her, waiting, almost expecting her to smile and admit it was a joke. She didn't. Instead, she looked calmly at Olivia. I'd like to purchase it. Olivia blinked once, then twice. The young associate suddenly realized she was holding her breath. Oh, she straightened slightly. Of course, ma'am. The manager let out a short laugh. Not as confident as before. Not quite. More defensive. Well, he spread his hands dramatically. Looks like we're doing this. A few customers exchanged glances. Nobody seemed eager to leave anymore. Something important was happening. Everyone could feel it. The manager stepped beside the display case. You understand the price, correct? The woman nodded. $3.8 million. Correct. The manager smiled. A little too widely. And payment won't be a problem? Olivia winced. The question sounded worse the second time. The woman looked directly at him. No. The answer came without hesitation. Without emotion. Without ego. Just certainty. Interesting. Very interesting. Because confidence often sounds different from arrogance. Arrogance needs attention. Confidence doesn't. Olivia carefully removed the necklace from the display. The diamonds scattered light across the showroom ceiling. Customers turned fully toward them now. The businessman who had been signing paperwork stopped signing. The elderly couple near the watches paused their conversation. Even employees from other sections drifted closer. The atmosphere felt less like a retail store, more like a theater. Everyone waiting for the next scene. The woman followed Olivia toward the private transaction desk, a quieter area, reserved for major purchases. As they walked, the manager stayed close. Too close. Almost as though he feared missing the moment everything fell apart. Olivia began entering information into the system. The woman provided her name. Simple. Professional. Grace Carter. Olivia typed it. The manager barely noticed. At least not yet. Would you like insurance documentation included? Olivia asked. Yes. Private delivery? The woman smiled. No need. The answer surprised Olivia. Most wealthy clients preferred armored transport, security teams, special arrangements. Grace seemed unconcerned. Interesting. Very interesting. As though carrying something worth millions wasn't unusual. The paperwork continued. Then came the final step. Payment. The manager crossed his arms. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment he believed would prove him right. Grace opened her purse. No rush. No drama. No attempt to impress anyone. She simply reached inside and removed a black card. Not platinum. Not gold. Black. Completely black. No visible logo from where most people stood. Olivia accepted it politely. Then looked again. Her eyes widened slightly. Interesting. Very interesting. Because she had never personally handled one before. Only heard about them during training. The manager noticed her reaction. What? Olivia looked up. Nothing. At least nothing she wanted to discuss publicly. She inserted the card into the terminal. The machine began processing. A small spinning circle appeared on the screen. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Nobody moved. 5 seconds. 6. The manager smiled again. There it is. Olivia frowned. What? The decline. Several employees nodded quietly. The transaction was taking longer than expected, which meant, well, everyone assumed it meant something. Grace remained completely relaxed. She looked through the showroom window toward the busy Chicago street, as though the outcome had already been decided. Interesting. Very interesting. Because she wasn't watching the screen. Everyone else was. Then suddenly, the terminal chimed. A soft sound, barely audible, yet it seemed to echo through the entire showroom. Olivia looked down, then looked again, then a third time. The color drained from her face. Not from fear, from disbelief. The manager leaned forward. What happened? Olivia didn't answer. The younger associate simply stared. The manager stepped closer. What happened? Finally, she turned the monitor toward him. The manager's smile vanished instantly. Approved. Not pending. Not partially authorized. Approved. The full amount. Every cent. The transaction hadn't merely succeeded. It had completed without triggering a single verification request, as though $3.8 million meant absolutely nothing. The manager blinked. Once. Then again. Customers began whispering. Employees exchanged looks. Nobody laughed anymore. Interesting. Very interesting. Because facts have a way of silencing assumptions. The manager cleared his throat. There must be some mistake. Olivia checked again. Then checked the authorization code. Then the bank confirmation. Everything matched. Everything. No mistake. The words felt strange coming from her own mouth. The manager stared at Grace, trying desperately to reconcile two realities. The woman he thought he understood, and the woman sitting calmly before him. One of them had to be wrong. Grace signed the final document. Smoothly, effortlessly, then returned the pen. Will that be all? The question almost sounded kind. The manager opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time all afternoon. He had no script, no assumption, no confidence, only confusion. Meanwhile, several employees gathered near the desk. One whispered, "Who is she?" Another shook his head. No idea. The businessman from earlier glanced at Grace more carefully now, and suddenly his expression changed. Recognition. Faint at first, then immediate. His eyes widened. Interesting. Very interesting. Because unlike everyone else in the showroom, he knew exactly who he was looking at. The man took a hesitant step forward. Then another. Finally he spoke. Not loudly, but loudly enough. "Excuse me." Grace turned. The businessman stared for a moment, almost making sure. Then he smiled. A shocked smile. The kind people wear when they unexpectedly meet someone famous. "Are you?" He stopped, still uncertain. Grace recognized him instantly, and her smile told him everything. The man's face went pale. Across the showroom, employees noticed. Customers noticed. Even the manager noticed. Because whatever name the businessman had almost said, it clearly mattered. A lot. Very, very much. And suddenly everyone in the showroom wanted to hear it, including the manager, who was beginning to realize that losing a bet might be the smallest problem he had. The showroom remained silent. The businessman couldn't take his eyes off Grace Carter. Neither could anyone else. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then the man finally laughed. Not because anything was funny, because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Oh my God." He shook his head. "I knew it." The manager frowned. "Knew what?" The businessman looked around the room, then back at Grace, still trying to process the moment. "I thought I recognized you." Grace smiled politely, the same calm smile she had worn all afternoon. The businessman extended his hand. "Michael Harrison." She shook it. "I remember." That answer made his eyes widen even further. Of course she remembered. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Michael Harrison wasn't just another customer. He was the CEO of Harrison Hospitality, a company that owned luxury hotels across 3 states. The type of man people usually recognized immediately. Yet at this moment, he looked like the least important person in the room. The manager stared. Confused. Very confused. He had heard the name. Everyone in Chicago business circles had. The question wasn't who Michael Harrison was. The question was why he looked nervous. Around them, customers leaned closer. Employees pretended not to listen. Nobody wanted to miss what came next. Michael smiled awkwardly. "I attended your foundation gala 3 years ago." Grace nodded. "I remember." The manager's stomach tightened. Foundation gala? Something wasn't adding up. Michael continued. You probably don't remember my speech. Grace laughed softly. The one that went 12 minutes over schedule? Several people chuckled. Michael pointed toward her. See? The laughter spread slightly. 4. The first time all afternoon, the atmosphere changed. Not lighter, just different. Because suddenly people were realizing something important. Grace wasn't famous because she was wealthy. She was wealthy because she was important. There was a difference. A very big difference. The manager felt sweat gathering beneath his collar. The feeling grew worse when Michael asked the question everyone wanted answered. Are you in Chicago for the Sterling acquisition? A few nearby customers exchanged glances. Grace smiled. No, really. Business can survive one day without me. Michael laughed. I don't think Wall Street agrees. Silence. Complete silence. The manager felt his heart stop. Not literally, but close. Because now several employees were pulling out phones. Several customers looked shocked. One woman near the entrance actually gasped. Interesting. Very interesting. Because the names still hadn't been spoken. Yet somehow everyone knew. Or thought they knew. Grace noticed the reactions. She sighed softly. The same way someone sighs when a private moment suddenly becomes public. I was hoping to buy a necklace. Michael smiled. Well, he glanced around the showroom. I don't think anyone will forget this purchase. The manager's mouth felt dry. Very dry. For the first time all afternoon, he desperately wanted the conversation to end. Instead, it continued. A young employee whispered something into another associate's ear. The associate immediately searched her phone, then froze. A second later, 3 more employees were searching. Pictures appeared. Articles. Magazine covers. Conference stages. Interviews. Awards. Faces. The same face now standing in their showroom, wearing simple jeans and a gray cardigan. Interesting. Very interesting. Because people often imagine billionaires looking a certain way. Luxury handbags. Private security. Designer labels. Grace looked like none of those things. And that was exactly why nobody had recognized her. The manager's phone vibrated. A message. Then another. Then another. He ignored them. Until the store director suddenly emerged from the back office. Moving quickly. Much more quickly than usual. The director looked. Directly at Grace. Then immediately straightened his jacket. Interesting. Very interesting. Because this was the same director who rarely left his office for anyone. The director approached. Hand extended. Ms. Carter. The entire showroom froze. There it was. The name. The confirmation. The truth. No more guessing. No more assumptions. The manager felt the room spin slightly. Grace Carter. Founder of Carter Global Ventures. Investor. Philanthropist. One of the wealthiest self-made women in America. A woman whose business portfolio touched everything from technology to hospitality to real estate. A woman whose charitable foundation had funded thousands of scholarships. A woman featured on magazine covers around the world. And he had challenged her to prove she could afford a necklace. Interesting. Very interesting. Because humiliation looks very different when viewed from the other side. The director shook her hand warmly. It's an honor to finally meet you. Grace smiled. Thank you. The director glanced around. Then noticed the expressions. The employees. The customers. The manager. Especially the manager. His smile faded. Only slightly. But enough. Something had happened here. Something important. The director could feel it immediately. Years in leadership had taught him how to read a room. And this room was screaming. He turned toward the manager. What happened? Nobody answered. The silence itself became an answer. The manager opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Not because he lacked words. Because he suddenly had too many. Every joke. Every assumption. Every dismissive comment. All replaying inside his head. The director looked back toward Grace. Then toward Olivia. The young associate seemed uncomfortable. As if she had spent the afternoon trapped between professionalism and embarrassment. Interesting. Very interesting. Because leaders often discover the truth by observing who looks guilty and who doesn't. The director's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. He understood. Maybe not every detail. But enough. Then Grace surprised everyone. She smiled. Not at the director. Not at Michael. At Olivia. The one person who had treated her with dignity from the beginning. Thank you for your help today. Olivia looked stunned. I was just doing my job. Grace shook her head gently. No. A brief pause. Then she said the words nobody in the showroom would ever forget. You were treating people the way they should be treated. The room fell silent again. Because everyone understood exactly what she meant, including the manager, especially the manager. And for the first time since this story began, he wasn't worried about losing a bet. He was worried about facing the truth. Because some mistakes cost money, others cost pride. And tomorrow morning, he was about to discover the difference. The next morning, the showroom felt different. Not because the displays had changed. Not because the diamonds looked different. Not because the customers were different. Something else had changed. The people. Interesting. Very interesting. Because one difficult truth can alter an entire room. The manager arrived 30 minutes early, a habit he had never developed before. Normally, he entered confidently, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, certain of his place in the world. Today felt different. Very different. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the same sentence. You were treating people the way they should be treated. Not directed at him, directed at Olivia. And somehow that made it worse. Because deep down, he knew she was right. The showroom was quiet when he entered. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows. The polished marble floors reflected ribbons of gold. Everything looked beautiful. Yet for the first time in years, he noticed something he had ignored before. The cleaning staff, the security guard, the delivery driver bringing inventory through the back entrance. People he passed every day. People he rarely saw. Interesting. Very interesting. Because humility often begins where assumptions end. At 9 o'clock, the store director called a staff meeting. Every employee gathered near the center showroom. Olivia stood beside the watch display. The manager stood near the back, unusually quiet. The director stepped forward. In 20 years of retail, I've learned something. The room fell silent. The products are never the most valuable thing in the building. Several employees exchanged glances. The director continued. People are. His eyes moved across the room. Slowly, deliberately. We sell luxury. A brief pause. But respect should never be a luxury. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Everyone knew what he was talking about. The director didn't mention names. He didn't have to. The lesson had already arrived. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Employees returned to their stations. Customers began arriving. The day moved forward. Yet something remained unfinished. The manager knew it. The director knew it. And most importantly, Grace Carter knew it. Around noon, a black SUV stopped outside the showroom once again. Several employees noticed immediately. The manager noticed too. His stomach tightened. Grace stepped inside. The same jeans. The same cardigan. The same calm expression. Interesting. Very interesting. Because she could have arrived surrounded by assistants, lawyers, executives, security. Instead, she arrived exactly the same way she had the day before. Alone. The showroom grew quiet. Not from fear. From anticipation. Grace smiled politely, then walked directly toward the manager. Every step seemed louder than it should have. The manager straightened, his pulse racing. For the first time in years, he genuinely didn't know what to say. Grace stopped in front of him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then he finally did. I'm sorry. No excuses. No explanations. No defenses. Just 4 words. Simple. Honest. Real. Interesting. Very interesting. Because genuine apologies are surprisingly rare. Grace studied him carefully. Not judging. Not punishing. Simply listening. The manager swallowed. I thought I knew who you were. Grace nodded. I know. His eyes lowered briefly. And I was wrong. The showroom remained silent. Several employees pretended to work. Nobody fooled anyone. Everyone was listening. The manager continued. I judged you before I knew anything about you. Grace smiled softly. Most people do. The answer surprised him. No anger. No bitterness. Just truth. Then she asked a question. A simple question. One that caught him completely off guard. Why? The manager frowned. What? Why did you assume I couldn't afford the necklace? The question lingered. The answer should have been easy. Yet it wasn't. Because the real answer felt ugly. Uncomfortable. Embarrassing. Finally he spoke. The way you were dressed. Grace nodded. What else? A pause. Longer this time. Then the manager looked down. The fact that you were black. The words landed heavily. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Grace simply listened. The manager took a deep breath. I didn't want to admit that. His voice cracked slightly. But it's true. The honesty surprised even him. Interesting. Very interesting. Because growth often begins the moment people stop lying to themselves. Grace remained quiet for several seconds. Then she smiled. Not because she approved, because she respected the truth. My mother cleaned office buildings. The manager looked up. Grace continued. Most people never noticed her. The showroom felt smaller somehow. More personal. My first business started in a room smaller than this display area. A faint laugh escaped her, and nobody thought it would succeed. The manager listened carefully. For once. Really listened. Grace folded her hands. The world spends a lot of time teaching people how to recognize wealth. A brief pause. Very few people learn how to recognize character. Nobody spoke after that, because there was nothing left to add. The lesson had already arrived. A few moments later, Grace turned toward Olivia. The young associate immediately looked nervous. Grace smiled, then handed her a small envelope. Olivia blinked. What's this? Open it. She did. Inside was a handwritten note and a scholarship check. Olivia stared at it, speechless. Grace remembered the conversation from the previous day. The grandmother, the dreams, the night classes Olivia had mentioned while helping another customer. Grace remembered all of it. You treated me with dignity when you thought I was nobody. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Grace smiled. Never lose that. The young woman nodded, unable to speak. Across the showroom, several employees wiped their eyes. Even the manager looked away for a moment, because suddenly this story wasn't about a necklace, or money, or status. It never had been. Grace glanced around the showroom one final time, then toward the manager. I hope you keep your job. His eyes widened. What? A small smile appeared. You promised to quit. A few employees laughed softly. The first genuine laughter in 2 days. Grace continued. I think learning is more valuable than leaving. The manager laughed too. Relieved, embarrassed, grateful, all at once. And for the first time since this story began, everyone understood. The real victory wasn't that a billionaire could buy a necklace. The real victory was that she didn't need people to know she was a billionaire to know her own worth. As Grace walked toward the exit, sunlight poured through the showroom windows. Warm, golden, quiet. Just before she reached the door, she turned back. Only once. And left them with a sentence they would remember for years. Never decide someone's value before learning their story. Then she smiled and walked away, not as the richest person in the room, but as the most respected. Because money can impress people. Power can influence people. But character changes them. The end. CTA, if this story touched your heart, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes the person standing quietly in front of you is carrying a story far greater than anything you can see.